All right, we are live. So, hello, my name is Colin, and welcome to episode 22 of Roll by Roll's Tavern Talk, a show where we, the Roll by Roll gang, discuss various aspects of running a great D&D campaign based on our experiences with D&D 5e and our current adventures in Emathan homebrew campaign. So joining me tonight are the rest of the Roll by Roll crew. So we have Egan, who plays Douglin,
Hello, hello.
and we have Max, who plays Kogon.
Good day.
Okay, so I personally was recently listening to a podcast by, they're called DoubleDM, a couple of guys out of Germany, I think they are. Love the podcast, and they were discussing an article by MT Black, who posted a blog called Dungeon Master Etiquette. And before anyone asks, there is a player etiquette one too that we might discuss at some point. So after hearing the discussion, I went and read the article myself, and I thought that would make a pretty good discussion topic for us today. So here we are. So as I understand it, MT Black basically asked his audience on social media what they believed were the most important points of etiquette for a dungeon master. I compiled the answers into 7 points, which I don't believe are in any particular order of importance. I think they all carry equal weight. And we're going to dig into those and kind of get our own thoughts around it. So, we'll start off at the top here, number 1. And guys, I think I'll read these out and then get your thoughts on them.
Sure.
Number 1, consistency is key. Apply the rules consistently. Be clear about whether you're using official rules or house rules, and ensure that the players understand and experience them uniformly throughout the campaign. If you need to make a change, communicate the reasons why and get player buy-in. In the same way, present the game world details as consistently as possible. This greatly aids player immersion. Egan, why don't you kick us off tonight? What do you think of consistency is key?
Yeah, I think so. Although with a game that is, creative by nature, it might be tough to always bat 1,000 on something like this. But I think if the intent is there and everybody is on the same page, then you eventually will get consistency throughout. Rules come up, or you have homebrew, or we were just talking earlier with Max about how he treats changing a weapon out. As long as you establish it, and that's good, for the goose, it's going to be good for the gander. Also turn it around. If a player can do it, can a monster or an NPC player do it as well? So
Yeah.
I think consistency, not just within the players, but does that also translate that might be coming back at you with with a monster able to do certain things. So but yeah, I think consistency is important. Probably of this list, in my opinion, probably the least that you got to be perfect on, if I may.
Max, thoughts?
Yeah, I think as far as like needing to be perfect, it's just I think what this is really trying to get at is like what Egan said, once something's been established, that's what you're going with. It's one thing to like mess up an obscure rule now and then, but it's like if you say like this is how this works, and then you as a DM, because this is geared towards a DM, flip that at some point to make things more challenging or to like surprise the players. Well, that's kind of a gotcha moment, and it's not what the characters or players are thinking about to try to counter and work their own strategies and stuff. And so you just made the game hard in a way that's unfair. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of why a lot of people responded to the multimedia, like social media posting with this, is because they've experienced some form of that before. So yeah, it seems to me pretty straightforward and clear. What I like is this little second part about consistency. that's not really about rules, but about presenting the game world details as consistently as possible. And I know for myself, that's something that I worked on in the beginning a lot when I was first DMing, was just, and it's for myself as well, but like just, and I would even use instead of the word consistent, constant, just always, you can't provide too much communication about what's going on in the environment and what's around you and things like that. And it just helps the players sink into what you're creating. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
All about it.
For myself, my thoughts, my immediate thought around this was 5e in particular was very much in my mind designed around an understanding that there were lots of things that would get house ruled because
Yeah.
there's just lots of things that there is no mechanical way to resolve them that you may come up to. And I mean, understandably, there are so many possible things that could come up in a game session. You know, we've had versions of D&D where there was a rule for darn near everything 4.e, and it it was it sort of it made the game difficult because those weren't rules you necessarily needed to have all the time. So you had to go looking for that one if suddenly you came up against those. But it's right there. Consistency. As long as everyone understands this is how it's going to work every time, and then there's nothing to argue there. As a DM in a homebrew world, game world details being as consistent as possible. The as possible is really important there because I know for myself as a DM in our adventures in Emathan homebrew, I often don't know the answers to the questions myself. We come up against something and I'm like, holy moly, I have no idea what. So I'm going to play this out as best I can. And then, over the next 2 weeks, I'm like, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that or that would have been so much cooler. And then you got to kind of just easily wedge that new understanding into the game, right? So, and as long as it's not a, yeah, you remember how I said that was a world of fire? It's actually a world of ice. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
as long as it's not too major, it's usually not too bad. All right, number 2, respect player agency. So value and respect your players. That means respecting their characters, their decisions, and their creativity. If a player uses an ability or item effectively or creatively, reward this ingenuity rather than looking for ways to counter it. This encourages players to pay attention, think laterally, and engage more deeply with the game. And avoid overriding player decisions and dictating character reactions, as this is a quick way to get players to disengage. Egan.
Might be my favorite on this list. And the reason is that I think this is where a lot of, not a lot, but some DMs can go astray. I think you want to put challenging things out, you want to do all that thing, to make sure that it's a difficult encounter or whatnot and create interesting things. When it becomes out to get you, though, a DM is out to get you, that's when I think it becomes more than that. And that's where you are going to get players very frustrated because they're going to feel picked on. They're going to feel like, well, I have a power that lets me do something and you're nerfing it for just the sake of nerfing it because you want to advance something. But the thing I love, and you guys told me this, is that the DM is part of the team. Like, they're our biggest fans as players. And if you have that mindset, then this is the best thing because you want to see these heroes succeed in creative ways after you've challenged them, after you've put something forward that was difficult to overcome. But um, yeah, let players also delve into their shortcomings. They may not always make the right decision and they may make wrong decisions on purpose to fit their character mold. roll with it, I guess, is the best way to do it. But I think this is a very important rule for DMs that I try to follow, and I know all the ones sitting here tonight do as well.
Max?
Okay, so I have a couple things. One is yes, but
Yep.
not everything a player does necessarily is in the spirit of forwarding this idea. Do you know what I mean? So like someone might just do something that is completely ridiculous and that shouldn't necessarily be rewarded. You know what I mean? And also it's okay. Rewarding ingenuity might also mean think of it as you're rewarding not necessarily in a positive way, but your reward is that you're engaging with what they're deciding to do. So a player might do something that's really interesting, but it's a bad idea in the world. And that's a consequence for them. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And that's cool because deep down, that's what players want. They want to feel like their actions have weight. So you got to kind of like, and that takes a lot of experience DMing. And that is like learning like what are you rolling with and what are you rolling with in a way that is like okay, that's cool, but you know, this is potential fallout, you know what I mean, of your idea and stuff, right? So like I'm not a big fan of the there's this kind of like meme or trope of like failing forward. Do you know what I mean? Like it's okay to just fail. You know, like
Absolutely.
sometimes things don't work out and that's part of the fun, right?
It can be
Um,
some of the best fun is when
oh
it's
yeah.
like, oh, bad decisions were made here. Now we have to.
And this leads me into point two, which is a lot of this is a learned skill. So it's tough as a DM. If you're beginning, you've planned your adventure and you have these things, and it can be tough when you're starting out to be good at improvising. And so, you know, your players and DMs need to have this sort of communication, you know, openness that like, hey, I've built this and you know, I might glaze over what you've done or have a react like it might seem like a canned reaction in retrospect. I'm sorry. You know, I was having a hard time trying to deal with all the information and this is what I had planned. You know what I mean? Like it does take work to get there. So yeah, this is great. Just give each other a break a little bit, you know what I mean? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, that's all I gotta
For
say.
for me, in in reading about some of the unfortunate experiences that people have, this is often one of the most spoken to, um, you know, disgruntled,
For
um,
sure.
respecting player agency, and I very much agree with what you said, Max. It it does require a certain amount of DM experience and comfort with rolling with it to maximize the player's agency. Because if you're not someone who can really just pull something out of the air and roll with it based on your player's decisions, you may have to, the this how many lanes are on the highway of where you're going
Mhm.
increases as you become a better DM. And so you can let them change lanes all over the place. But in the beginning, you might just have a one lane road and it's pretty bumpy and you're doing the best you can. And you have to throw that back at players a little bit sometimes too and say, I just I didn't have anything ready to go in that direction. I'm sorry we couldn't really. I could see what you were trying to do there, but I don't have anything ready to make that
Yeah.
a fun night of play, right?
Or
So
know how to handle it even, right?
yeah,
Like
exactly. Um you kind of used the two phrases that I hear all the time are no but and yes and, right? And they can work as a DM if you're trying to find the common ground between rolling fully with what you've tried to do in terms of player agency and what I feel comfortably that I
yeah.
can work with right now. You can
Yeah.
use those terms a little bit to say, yeah, I okay, and this, this is in play, that helps me kind of keep control of the situation.
But isn't respect player agency part of if a player makes a bad decision, you as a DM respect the bad decision and then guide it where it needs to go? You did a dumb thing. Here's the consequence,
Yeah.
but you're respecting it. So there's a way to kind of, you know, guide that through, if you will, instead of just saying, no, that's dumb, you can't do that. Because saying stuff like that, you shut a player down,
Yeah.
right?
And I mean, there's certain caveats too. Like, I fly up there. I want to fly, and it's like, well, do you have the spell? Do you have wings? Like, no,
Right.
like that's extreme example of
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? But like, like, oh, I want to try to like lift this mountain. I have a 20. If I roll a 20, it's like, no, you just can't do those things.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
it's just
Like, there's
it's
certain-
not possible.
yeah,
So
there's
no
certain things
rule
like that
can
that are sort of
yeah.
like that's the fringe cases. That's probably not what this is referring to, but
Yeah, you know what I mean. That sometimes then you've just got a problem player that maybe you
yeah,
need to have some discussions with, right? So,
yeah.
all right, number 3, be prepared and knowledgeable. Ensure you have a solid grasp of the game rules. You don't need to be an expert, but you should understand the fundamentals. Prepare adequately for each session. The level of preparation required can differ among, I would say beyond can, absolutely differs among DMs, as some are naturally adept at improvisation. Determine the amount of prep you personally need to ensure a good session. A knowledgeable and prepared DM facilitates a smoother and more immersive experience for players. Egan. I don't think
I
there's a
think
lot to disagree with in this one. That was
no, and
it's pretty straightforward.
I think it's the number one reason why more people don't DM.
Oh,
They are
absolutely.
so worried about not being prepared and not, I mean, I'm not worried personally like the rules because, also as a DM you have, you can make things work. It's the preparation and knowing, I think a lot of especially like novice DMs or ones that just don't have long-term experience, they get stopped. They get like sort of blocked up because of the worry of not being prepared and having all the answers for it. Oh no, what if this character improvises? Like, I don't have something for that. So I couldn't agree more. I think this is absolutely a must, but I also think it is the number one reason more people don't DM.
Yep.
Absolutely. Max?
Yeah, so I think there's two distinctions here. So one is uh give yourself a break if you're starting out again. You might end up being underprepared, but it's because of no fault of your own. You're still learning how to prepare properly and what's required and things like that. And then there's the other side, which is you do have some experience or you are experienced and you're like, shit, it's game night. I wasn't ready. Okay, well, I'll just full on wing this and you're not a very good wing it kind of player or DM, you know what I mean? That is now you want your players to respect your time, but you got to respect your players' time,
Absolutely.
and that's not going to be a fun night. And you're better off, I think, just canceling or just playing, bringing out a board game or whatever. You know what I mean? If it's going to be a social gathering kind of idea, and just preparing your players like, hey, I fucked up, I'm not ready.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
everyone will appreciate that way more than this. Than I've been there.
A train wreck type of session.
It will be a train wreck. It'll be a half-assed, low energy. Like people are gonna be like wanting to grab their phones and get out of there, kind of idea. You know what I mean? Like it's not gonna be fun at all. So that's
Yeah, I agree with that. In terms of being prepared and knowledgeable. So start with knowledgeable. I've admitted to you guys lots of times. I mean, I do understand the fundamentals of the game,
Yeah.
but there are, especially nowadays with all the classes and all the subclasses and all the different character builds, I don't understand them all. Like
It's impossible.
yeah,
that's
and
player responsibility though.
exactly. And
You know?
I have no problem. That is why, as a group, I always say explain your ability you're using, explain your spell you're using. I can pretend that's for the studio audience, that's for me, so I know how that works.
For the studio audience, would you explain that rule, please?
you know um But you do need to understand the fundamentals of the game, or I think you get back, you start to fall into one there where consistency can start to falter then because you're not following those basic fundamentals. Then as far as being prepared, I really like what you said, Max. It it it's a lot of work to be a DM. I believe the right amount of prep is whatever you need to be comfortable going into the session. And who knows how much that is, from
Yeah.
I can write 3 things on a napkin and I'm ready to roll to, I've spent the last 2 weeks prepping for this. It gets easier the more you do it but one thing I always encourage people around, DMs around being prepared and knowledgeable, especially in the beginning, take a little time after the session and debrief yourself in terms of what went well, what didn't go well, and what can I do to fix the things that didn't go well next time. That will ultimately reduce the amount of prep time you need because you'll start to understand the things that I don't need to prep and the things that I do need to prep. And they're different for every person, right?
Yeah.
All right. Number 4, honor player boundaries and foster inclusion. Be attentive to your players' comfort levels and boundaries. Avoid introducing content that may be inappropriate. Do not show favoritism towards some players. Rather, ensure the spotlight is shared around equally. In the same way, do not hold grudges against a player. Indeed, avoid being adversarial and instead treat all players in a fair and welcoming manner. I don't think we really need to discuss this one much, guys. I
This
think
one.
this is pretty straightforward.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
We're a group of friends that have been playing together for a while. We kind of understand each other's boundaries. I can see this would really come into play if you're joining groups you don't know, or you have groups of people that are coming together that don't know each other. That's where
Yeah.
this one would really be important, right?
And there's a lot between what that paragraph just stated. Like, there's a big stretch between having everybody involved in a role play and hey, I don't like torture,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's
There's a
there.
lot in there. There's a lot
Yeah,
in there. Yeah.
yeah. Just have a chat, man, and
Yeah.
and
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 work
that's
it out.
why session 0 can be really important.
Oh yeah,
Right? You
yeah.
can talk about all of those things and figure out where those boundaries are. And all right, number 5, avoid overbearing control. While guiding the game, avoid being overly controlling in your storytelling. Allow space for player-driven narrative and be flexible enough to adapt when players take unexpected paths. Where possible, incorporate changing character goals into the campaign. Avoid lengthy lore dumps or sessions dominated by exposition, and instead balance DM narrative with player interaction. Egan?
I think number 5 is the difference between a good DM and a great DM. I think as DMs, when you're prepping, you want so badly for the players to go this way and do this. And, you prepared for this or that. And, you have things that you, in essence, want to get to. I think number 5 here, avoid overbearing control, is tough. It is a talent that the great DMs have, and knowing when to, as you said, let player dialogue, let Max and I, Kogon and Douglin chat, let them, RP a little bit, and some of the best stuff comes from that. Yeah, sure. You have, your prep for the session, and there's a story to be told and the overarching, but it's the minutia, it's the little stuff that makes it so much better. And allowing it to breathe and be organic and all that stuff, it's not easy. And as I said, I do think this is the difference between a good, and there are a lot of good DMs and they're a lot of fun, and a great DM that takes it to a whole nother level.
Max?
Yeah. I think like the first part of that is pretty straightforward and reasonable for sure. And then to me the most important thing here is the avoid lengthy lore dumps and sessions dominated by exposition.
Yeah.
And it's easy as creative game makers, designers, storytellers, whatever you want to. You wear a lot of hats as DMs, right? But the first and foremost thing is that you're creating a playscape for your players to enjoy. So if you have those sort of creative tendencies, then you should be writing that stuff up and maybe giving it to your players, a platform for them to read it on their own and stuff. And you just give them the Coles notes, because this isn't, you're there for them to facilitate them having an experience, right? They're not there to be your audience.
Yeah.
So yeah, the balance. Obviously, you need some, and players will enjoy some, but it's just like it's gonna start to feel like a lecture at some point if you're going on and on. And they're gonna be like, "When do we actually play, man?"
They want to
So
be part of the story.
yeah, and I'm speaking again from experience on both ends. I have had sessions where I did too much, and I was like, they're not enjoying this nearly as much as I enjoy gushing about my world. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They want to be in it more and have it feel like a living place. They don't care as much about like all this exposition and outside world info and stuff like, you know what I mean? Like it's just not, it needs to be more organic for their end, you know what I mean? So anyways, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. So both of you are bang on there. For me, like I heard this before, um, in terms of, and sorry, I'm kind of getting back to what you said there around the lore dumps, right? So there is this thing in that I've heard several times around running a good session is show, don't tell,
Yeah.
right? So show them by what they're doing in the world what the world is all about. Don't tell them what the world is all about, right? Um, I love player driven narrative. That's one thing we've always done really well within this group. I have literally had sessions where I've sat back for 15, 20 minutes and there's just dialogue going on and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, this is great. Like, I love this. This is what you want. You want to be able to build a story that the characters just feel they can run with. Like, we own this. We can just go with this, right? Rather than them always wondering, what's my next move, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is another one that I think when you are newer as a DM, you might struggle with because getting back to the what we talked about there around knowledge and preparation, you just might feel you need to railroad the characters a little bit into what you prepared because you don't feel comfortable enough just to roll with it, right? So you then come across as kind of overbearing in terms of what you're doing. Yeah, it's another good one. Number 6. Communicate clearly and effectively. Keep communication with your players clear and direct when introducing new rules or making other significant decisions. Discuss these openly with your group to maintain transparency and clarity. At the start of each session, provide a simple recap of the last session. Don't be afraid to ask the players clarifying questions, and I think that one works both ways, especially when you are describing character actions. Egan.
Yeah, first of all, I love this idea here. I think it's so important too. I can't tell you how many times, guys, I've chatted with Colin on the side there about character development, storyline, powers, custom classes that we've created. It's also been a chance to say, hey, this isn't working for me. You don't have to drag down a session to, air some issues. You can do it on the side and communicate. And the great groups can do it without any, agenda there. Just say, I'm trying to better the game or my experience, and I think in turn it's going to help everybody and all that. Um, I love describing actions. I think, fine, you don't have to describe Eldritch Blast every single time, but kill something, yeah, maybe you throw in a little thing, a
Flavor.
little flair. But yeah, I think it's a really fun part of the game. And but yeah, chat with the DM, chat with your, group mates and stuff like that, and make sure everything's cool. We've done it many times, and I think very effectively, because it's sort of got us back on track if we were swaying and issues we didn't even know were there. Now we know, and we're all better for it, if you will.
Max?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to say about this one. This one is basically feels like the subtext of each of the other points. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It's just kind of
Yeah.
like the broad strokes of what everything else is basically pointing out. It's just, yeah, it's obviously great. Kind of seems like common sense, but you might have a group too where like there's a few introverts and like, or you're new with each other and you're shy, and it's just like you got to get over that pretty quickly and just like communicate clearly and effectively.
Yeah. For myself, I clear communicating clearly and effectively is what makes or breaks a group. I think it's really, if as a group you can't have good communication in and out of game, it's going to make operating as a group difficult. I like a session recap because I mean everybody goes away for a couple weeks or longer, and it
Mhm.
just gives everyone an opportunity to set, because the recap to me, I know everybody there is like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I remember that, or oh, and I was gonna do this, and it's that little bit at the beginning of the game where everyone sort of dials back in and remembers what happened and what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then asking questions, clarifying questions. The only point I want to make about that is I think that it leans in a little bit around number two, respecting player agency and avoiding overbearing control. I know newer DMs are going to struggle with. I want to clarify what you want to do without making it seem like I'm trying to dissuade you from doing that thing,
Yeah. Or
right?
counter your tactic. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I just want to make sure I really understand that you just said you were going to do what you're going to do, right? And, finding that balance a little bit. But again, as long as as the DM, you're clearly communicating that you do whatever you want. I just want to make sure I understood what you just said you were going
Yeah.
to do. Because I think, Max, you said it earlier, it comes with consequences. So I want to
Yeah.
make sure I'm dishing the consequences out properly, right? And last but not least in here, encourage mutual respect. Foster an environment of respect where both DM and players feel heard and valued. Encourage players to actively listen when others are taking their turn. This creates a what? Oh dear God, what is that word?
Collegial.
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 Yeah.
Ah, should have read that one a little closer earlier.
We were
This,
underprepared.
yeah, no
Oh
kidding.
no.
This creates clearly. I just buzzed over that when because I've read this article probably a dozen times. Table environment and often leads to excellent role playing moments. Check in with the players after heavy sessions or if you think someone's boundaries were violated. Resolve conflicts quickly and directly rather than ignore them. Egan?
I mean, this sort of encapsulates everything else that we've been talking about. Without mutual respect, there is no game board, right? Because if there's not, sooner or later, something is going to come up to piss someone off if there's not a mutual respect there. And if you're doing all of the other things, communicating clearly and effectively, avoid overbearing control, if you're doing all the other things, then this one is sort of a natural. But conversely, too, as a player or a DM, if you're not having fun, that's not the group for you. It's if you don't feel respected as a player,
Yeah.
there are groups where there are players that feel like they can't say anything because others bully them. It happens.
Yeah.
Get out. That's
Yeah.
not the group for you. And if the DM does not like hear you and do something about it, get out. That is not the table for you unless you're into that stuff. No judgment.
Yeah. Max?
Yeah, so I'm gonna just to expand on what Egan is saying, just because this is, flavored. It's from the DM perspective and stuff. So, whether you like it or not, usually as a DM, you're basically like the game's manager. You know what I mean? And you kind of
Dungeon
it just
manager.
happens. But you are like you do become the de facto organizer and facilitator and mediator
Yes.
of the group. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And if you have to be prepared to handle that responsibility and have grown-up talks with people, you know what I mean? And so I think if you can't do that, then maybe DMing's not right for you, you
Yep.
know? At least if you're playing with people who aren't part of your inner circle, perhaps, right? It might even be more important with inner circle people. I don't know, depending on what your friend dynamics are like. But and then I would like to highlight encourage players to actively listen when others are taking their turn. I think that's so huge. You're gonna have people who are well-meaning, but they're spotlight people and they just disengage when it's not their turn. Do you know what I mean? And it's not necessarily meant to be rude all the time or anything, but they're not taking into account that their players are as a part of the world as they are. You know what I mean? As that person is and stuff. So to me, that's a huge one, and it makes everyone feel. I found anyways more valued, and ultimately everyone's engaged when that's happening, right? Because it's important for your players to feel like you, the DM, are responding to them, but it's equally as important for your players to feel like their other players are responding to what they're doing, right? So it's pretty huge
Yeah,
in my opinion.
it's so couple of thoughts. So you definitely need to have respect between everybody at the table, right? And to your point, Max, as the DM, you need to understand that you are likely the person that's going to have to initiate discussions around things that may not be going well, right? Like if things have happened in a session or things have happened specifically with a person, you are sort of the center point of the game. Everyone is kind of working within that environment. You're the team manager. It's
Yep,
and at
pretty
the end of
much.
the day, if people have issues, especially if they're not a close knit group, they might just come in to play together once in a while. You are likely going to be the person. So you have to be the person that's going to talk to the group if a session got heavy, like it said here, or if somebody, like something happened in the session that got a little out of control or whatever. And I like here, I mean, resolve it quickly and directly. Just get to it. We've had it a few times in our group in the past, and you just have to deal with it quickly because if not, it has the potential to fester into something and just ruin things with the group, right? So, um, yeah. So I'm gonna put you guys on the spot as we wrap up here. Um, if you had to pick one of the 7 Dungeon Master etiquette rules here, which do you and the way I'm going to word this to you guys is which do you think has the biggest potential to ruin a table and
If
why?
it's not followed kind
If
of
it's
idea.
not followed, sort of thing, by a DM.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
All right, okay. You ready, Egan?
Not anymore. I was. Um, 7. At the end of the day, I think this could be the one that can quickly derail a group. I mean, all the other stuff, sometimes we don't communicate, but it could just be an omission. I don't think there's any, bad things there. Sometimes you want to take control of a group. But if there's no respect, as I said, I don't think there's a table.
Okay, let's change this a little bit because I feel like 6 and 7 basically wrap around
I was going to
one
say
through
the
five.
same. Yeah,
You know what I mean?
they do.
So maybe pick from 1 through 5 because 6 and 7 are baked into everything else.
They are.
Really,
Yeah.
Okay,
you know what
Max, please avoid overbearing control. Okay.
I mean?
So 5. I'm gonna say
All
5.
right.
No, but that's
Yeah.
that's a very I
Yeah.
agree with both of you guys on that. It's like 6 and 7 are baked into those first 5, right?
It's
They're
kind of the whole thing together. So yeah. Well, I'm gonna go with that
number
anyway.
5 for you, Max.
I'm gonna say number 3.
Being
You don't
prepared.
have
Yeah.
a game ready to run. No one's playing that game basically. You know what I mean? It's just like you're gonna fizzle out fast and quick right there. You know, so
Yep.
maybe that's a little too obvious, but I think that one would definitely derail a table pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple
So
sessions of someone
for
just
myself,
Yep.
I think in terms of the first 5, if we asked 10 people this, which of these 5 do you think a dungeon master would have the greatest chance of ruining a table? It's definitely going to be based on their personal experience, because any one of those 5 things I think has the potential to make a table,
Oh, absolutely.
crappy,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
If you've been in a situation where the DM changes the rules to suit the game for themselves every time they
Yeah.
turn around, that's going to bug the shit out of you, right? So,
Yeah.
but I'm going to agree with you, Max. I think for myself personally, it it ruins even my game when I'm not prepared. Like even beyond, I've had times where I've pulled it off, and asking the group, it's like, oh yeah, last night's session was great. And I'm thinking, dear man, I just hated last night because
Yeah.
I just felt like I was flailing the whole night to try and hold it together. Right. So, from in terms of the biggest possibility of ruining it for the group and for yourself, just even it's not the knowledgeable part, because I think if hopefully if you're not in the knowledgeable part, you wouldn't yet get into the DMing
Yeah.
part.
You have to understand something.
But not being prepared, yeah, that's the
I can
one for
do it.
me as well.
And it's also one that is like you could even be prepared most sessions, but and not even be like malintended, if you will. But if you consistently are not prepared, or every third session you're not prepared, so like the others, it seems like there's sort of like an intent behind it. This could
Yeah.
just be like a thing that you don't mean to not do it. It can really though mushroom out and be a big
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, gents. Great discussion. I think we'll wrap this one up for the night.
I feel like I'm a better DM after all of this.
Me
So,
too.
I actually I look forward to talking this same thing around the player
Yeah.
side of this. So maybe it'll be a good topic for next session. So
I think so.
we'll make that a wrap for episode 22 of Roll by Roll's Tavern Talk. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed the topic. Tavern Talks occur the Thursday after each of our Saturday night Adventures in Emathan sessions. Our next session is scheduled for Saturday, March 16th. So not this weekend, but next weekend. For those of you watching on YouTube, please support us by making sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel. We'd really appreciate it. So guys, as we do at the end, we'll offer up a cheers to ourselves and all present. And thanks very much for joining us in the tavern. And hopefully you can join us again next time. All right, we will shut it down. Thanks, guys.
No problem. Thank you.
Awesome. I will